Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Livingston, and I'm with Want Leverage Communications. Welcome to PR Patter. This is my semi-weekly show where I invite guests from across my PR and marketing network to join me in conversations that affect us all who work in marketing. And so today, I am really delighted to have as my guest Dr. Hans Schroeder from the University of Michigan and Jody Sutter from the Sutter Company. And before I get further into their introductions, I do want to remind you to please go to my website, wantleverage.com, and download my updated downloadable called Make Your C-Suite Stand Out on LinkedIn. Okay, let's get back to our fabulous guests. Hans Schroeder is a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Michigan and a clinical assistant professor of psychiatry at the University of Michigan Medical School. He provides therapy for people with anxiety problems, including obsessive compulsive disorder and perfectionism. Those sound kind of familiar. He also conducts research on how people think and talk about mental health, which is, who's not talking about mental health today? We're in such an intense world at this moment. I think everybody is having some mental health issues. Jody Sutter is the owner of the Sutter Company, a business development coaching and advisory firm, and the inventor of Build, Win, Scale, a system which is a step-by-step process designed to help leaders of small marketing agencies identify and activate their natural talents for sales and marketing, leading to a sustainable approach to winning new business. Jody, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Hans, could you tell us a little bit about your backstory? How did you get to where you are today?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, thank you, Julie, for having me. And it's nice to talk with you today, Jody. So where to begin? How do I get interested in psychology? It's a long story, but I'll just say that when I was at college at Michigan State, go green, go white, by the way, I got into a lab. It was actually focused on anxiety problems, and worry and perfectionism were a big part of the lab. So we actually studied brain activity and what happens after you make mistakes. So it was interesting, the topic of rejection today. I've been studying mistakes and rejection and negative feedback for a long time. And so I ended up staying at Michigan State for my graduate school and learned how to conduct psychotherapy, which is what my primary job here is at University of Michigan, doing therapy for patients with anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. So it's a long story, but I'll just say that I've been interested in this space for a long time.
Wow, that's great. I'm just so thrilled to have you here because of your breadth of experience. It's terrific. And Jody, give us a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, well, I'm basically a career business development person working with creatively driven firms. Mostly those have been marketing agencies, but they really span from traditional to design to digital, as well as some services that sell to the marketing industry, like software and technology. I got into sales because for a brief time, right after college, I was working for an art magazine, and I somehow got stuck in the circulation department. And I would look at the woman and my colleagues in the ad sales department, and they were always going out to lunch with gallery owners, and then parties in the evening. I was like, I want to do that. So I got into sales, but I started out working for production companies, commercial production companies. So was always sales oriented. As I moved through my career, I started selling less to agencies and selling more for agencies. And I got more into this idea of consultative selling. I've always found that my background in sales was actually quite unique for the agency world that I was working in. And since starting my own business, I really wanted to focus on helping people who don't really feel like salespeople tap into some natural abilities. So drawing on my experience to help others. Mostly I want my clients, owners of small marketing agencies, to be able to feel like they've got some control. I like to call it control over their business development destiny. Some control, that they always have the ability to generate revenue when they need it.
That's awesome. So Hans, let's start with you. When I get rejected, to be very honest, when I get rejected after sending a client a proposal, or, I'm pitching a journalist, and very often they don't answer at all, or they say, sorry, we're going to pass on your story idea. Ugh, it feels like a knife in my heart. I'm so passionate about my work that, it hurts. It hurts, and it can stay with me for a really long time. Tell us about the psychology of rejection.
I'm
Why
smiling
is it
because
so painful?
I'm smiling because I relate so much to that. Yeah. So I'll say that probably rejection is so powerful because we are hardwired as humans to be connected with people, right? We're a very social species. We evolved to be in groups. So whenever we're sharing ideas and we're passionate about something, especially if there's a lot of excitement and something falls flat, someone says pass or no, that's going to hit us. And one thing I'd like people to take away from today is that our emotions are there for a reason. They're trying to tell us things, right? So that is it's telling me, wow, I really valued this interaction and it didn't happen for me. So I think rejection is powerful because it's important to us. It's important to have those connections. Whenever we experience frustration with rejection or anger or
Oh,
anxiety, those are telling us things, right? I experience rejection almost every day. I have to say.
I mean, I kind of do also.
Mhm.
Certainly when I'm doing outreach to the media.
Whether it's telling someone a joke that I think is really funny, but it's not funny to anyone else, or in my world, having papers get rejected from journals, I spend months and months analyzing data, writing what I think is a really great paper. It's going to be a great contribution. And then they don't even review it and say, nope, rejected, go on to the next journal. That sucks. Like that's not a good feeling.
No.
Yeah. So it's hardwired. It's telling us that, wow, something really important is happening here. And what we can talk about today is how do we make sense of that rejection? What are the thoughts that we have after that?
Yeah. Okay. And so what is it about rejection that makes it so damn powerful? Like, why does it stay with us it could stay with us for years?
Yeah.
It stings so badly. Why?
Well, there's probably lots of reasons why rejection might stick with us. And one thing as a therapist that I get really curious about is how do we make sense of that rejection? What are the thoughts that are coming up? How do we interpret that right after it? And one thing that we know with thoughts, and thoughts are like sentences or phrases that we have about the world. Um, uh, One thing we know is that a lot of those are underneath our consciousness. They're underneath our awareness. They're just happening so quickly.
Yeah.
So we might, for instance, if I get a paper rejected, I might say just really quickly in my head, oh, I must not be a good scientist, or I'm not good enough.
Right. You go right to the negative.
We're right to the negative, and we catastrophize and we make these general conclusions about who we are. I think if we have thoughts like that, that's going to keep that rejection, anxiety, and anger and frustration fueled up and going for a long time. But in therapy, what we can do, and you can do a lot of this on your own, is pay attention to those thoughts and really start to question, is that really what we're saying here? Is that the only way to look at the situation? Or should you just ditch research after this rejection? I'm harping on
I
this.
hope not.
It's very near and dear to my heart, obviously. So are there any other ways of looking at this? Does this say something about me as a person, or does this say something about my effort? What my product? Can I make adjustments going forward to that? Or is it all set in stone and a foregone conclusion?
Right. I mean, is there something that you have to tell your brain to do?
Oh, absolutely. And one thing I will say is that, people don't like feeling anxious or angry, right? We try to get out of those spaces very quickly. So if we get rejected, we might want to move on right away and, send the same product to somebody else and just forget about it. Oh, I don't even want to think about how terrible that was, right? That's why thinking back to past rejections, I don't know about you guys, but there's like a stomach drop feeling that I get, like thinking about the moment that I was rejected in some way. It's not good.
I mean, I think of, when I was in the corporate world, being laid off here and there, and I still think about it decades later. Oh, I can't stand it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's those really powerful emotional experiences are, again, telling you something that was a really important moment in your life. So the way that we think about things, we can get into mindsets at some point, but I think mindsets, growth and fixed mindsets, which I'm happy to talk about, can really play an important role in how we respond to rejection.
I've actually done some cognitive behavioral therapy, and I found that it really has helped me an awful lot. Would you be able to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, good for you, Julie. And I'm glad you're talking about this, because this is, we are talking about mental health more. So yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy, its premise is based on the connections between our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. So thoughts are how we make sense of the world. Feelings are our emotions like anxiety, anger, sadness, and behaviors are the actions that we take. Now, it turns out that it's really hard to change your feelings directly. Have either one of you tried to say, wake up in the morning and say, all right, today, no anxiety, go?
I haven't, Jody, have you?
I haven't even bothered to try because
Don't try. Don't try. It doesn't work. It does not work. So it's really hard to change our feelings directly. But what we can do is we can get curious about, how am I making sense of my world right now? How am I making sense of my experiences, my rejections, my successes? Those are the thoughts. And we can definitely change and address some of the behaviors that we take. So many of us, once we get rejected, we might have the conclusion or thought, I'm just not cut out for this. And then we stop trying. So that's the behavior, right? And so that's going to fuel anxiety and anger and sadness in the long run. So in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, what we're doing is addressing the thoughts and changing up the behaviors so that we're feeling better overall.
Very cool.
It sounds fascinating.
Jody, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to come back to you, Hans. What are some, tell us a little bit more about what you do with clients to get them into the sales process and manage rejection when it happens, because in sales, it happens all the time, constantly.
Right. Yeah. So I talk a lot about the 4 fears of business development. Number 1 is fear of rejection. Yeah, I'm going to put myself out there, and I work really hard to help my clients put the odds in their favor. But the fact is, business development, sales, marketing, the model of it is you promote yourself to a wider audience than you could probably reasonably service, because only so many people are going to come back and want to hire you.
Right.
So there's the fear of rejection. There's the fear of getting started. Where do I even start? Especially if you are like you, Julie, a PR specialist or a creative director who now runs this agency, and they don't know how to promote themselves.
Right. They're like, we're like I often feel like the shoemaker's children.
Yeah. Yes. So there's fear of getting started. Then there is fear of keeping going, especially around agency owners who maybe feel a little shame that they tried getting out there and doing outbound prospecting, and they tried it for a little while and it didn't work, or they were rejected. Or usually what happens is they tried it, they got distracted by other things, and then they said, see, I knew it. I knew I couldn't do it. I knew that I wouldn't be able to keep it up. And then there is the fear of like, well, if I invest all this, because business development tends to be a long game, what if after 9 months of doing whatever I'm doing, nothing's happened, and I've spent all this money, spent all this time? So I address them in different ways. And
I just want to ask you one question.
Yeah.
Do you find that your clients go into a sales situation, a biz dev situation, already feeling rejected, or are they anticipating it while they're
often?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And where I often come down to say, look, rather than going in and thinking about this person who could potentially reject you, let's be a little less people pleasing and a little bit more confident in our value. So I work a lot with my clients on, let's understand what your market positioning is, who your ideal client is, and not only who they are, but what are their issues that you are focused on solving. And so then it becomes something like, Julie, if I were to be pitching my service to you, I'd say, Julie, I work with agency owners like you. In my experience, so this is you own your experience. So in my experience, I find that agency owners like you often struggle in these areas around business development. Is that true for you? So you might say, it's actually not true for me. Boom, I've just been rejected. However, Um, but I
You've
know
been
through my
rejected when we're
experience.
talking about rejection, right?
But I also know, like, well, it's that what is true for me with my clients doesn't have to be true for Julie. So she's not actually my ideal client. Good for her. Business development is going fine. And that is when I say, well, I'm going to go to the next person, because I know in my past I've worked with dozens of clients who have these issues. I know there've got to be more out there. So I try to get my clients to look at it that way. Be more confident in the value that you offer, in the value you've offered to others in the past, and be cognizant of that when you go out and talk to like-minded people. What I also find is agency owners tend to want to be all things to all people. So I want to work in financial services and consumer packaged goods and automotive.
It's
And I want to
dizzying.
tell them I can do everything. And you're just setting yourself up for rejection, because I'd be interested in knowing what Hans says, because that is very confusing to the recipient. Well, you do everything. How do I even sort that out? And a confused mind always says no. So they're going to say, that's interesting that you do everything for all people. I don't see myself in that. So no, thank you. Not interested in a meeting.
Hans,
They
what
move
would
on.
you say?
Well, it's interesting. It makes me think of the first thing that comes to my mind is therapists on certain websites where you can find a therapist will also say they specialize in like 100,000 different things. And I find, for me as a patient, I find that confusing. I want someone who specializes in something that I'm looking for. So I can see that. I can see that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I'd also be interested in knowing whether I have had any idea what I'm talking about by getting Hans to validate this. One of the things I've learned in my research is to, like, why do agencies continually sell themselves poorly by saying we do all things for all people? And I think part of it also seems to be the fact that we receive information first through our amygdala. So our amygdala, I think, again, I'm a little embarrassed by saying this in front of someone who probably knows it much better than I do. But like, we want things clear. We want things, it's got to be about us. We don't want to have to think too hard about this. And yet when we are pitching ourselves, when we're coming up with these more sort of higher processed thoughts, it's our neocortex. So it's like a disconnect. Our neocortex is writing the pitch, but the lizard brain is receiving the pitch. And I think once I can talk to my clients about that, and they're like, oh, like the light goes on. Oh, and now they can see how they have essentially been sabotaging themselves for years.
Hans, can you elaborate on that? Is that the right description of?
I think that's a great description, Jody. I love that, actually. Yeah, I think that I love that because it speaks to an old behavioral principle called the law of least effort. We don't want to have to think hard. In almost all of our decisions, we were going to pick the one where we're going to have the least resistance. We have phrases like this, right? Path of least resistance. We're going to make it clear cut. You don't have to think. That's going to actually, be way more attractive if you can see the decision much more clearly and you can
Yes.
know what it's going to take. Yeah.
I love that. I might have to steal that law of least effort. I also think it's, and you had mentioned, Hans, that it's that therapists will do that too. And my hypothesis is that it happens a lot if you sell services, which are abstract, rather than selling, I don't know, a car or a garden hose.
Yeah.
You can say, my garden hose is stronger and it's longer and it won't rust the way others do. Yeah. That's so much more tangible. And yet when you're selling services, it's already abstract. So
that's
it's so
fascinating.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So Hans, how does mindset and then mindfulness come into play in dealing with rejection?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Julie. So what I'll say is, so mindsets refer to, when I'm using the term mindsets, I'm referring to a set of beliefs that all of us have about our abilities. And this comes actually out of the educational psychology space from Carol Dweck. She's a researcher out of Stanford. You might have heard of her. Yeah.
Yep, I have.
Yeah. So these mindsets refer to, we tend to have one of two beliefs about our abilities. One belief, called the fixed mindset, says you're born with what you have. There's really not much room for improvement. Things like intelligence or ability or probably business acumen, business skills are pretty fixed. You can't really do much to change those. Contrast that with the growth mindset, which says, yeah, we're all born with different abilities and, not everyone can be Albert Einstein or anything, but we can develop and cultivate our skills and abilities. And it turns out there's been a lot of research showing that people with these two different mindsets handle rejection, setbacks, mistakes very differently. So in the fixed mindset, we say, well, it's important because intelligence can't change. It's important to me to demonstrate to everyone else that I don't make any mistakes. Because if I make a mistake, that's actually evidence that I don't have what it takes, that I'm flawed, I'm stupid, I'm a failure. We go into those thoughts that we were talking about earlier. We start catastrophizing. Versus the growth mindset attitude, which is mistakes are great. I love rejections. I love setbacks because they're telling me about how I can improve upon my abilities, how I can get stronger and better. So these different mindsets, and all of us have fixed and growth mindsets about things. I have a fixed mindset about lots of different things. I have growth mindsets about other things. And we can work on these mindsets. And I will say that I think our culture right now is very results driven, very like you need to have success right now. I was thinking about this morning. I think in the sports world, a head coach in a football team gets like 2, maybe 3 seasons of losing records before they're fired.
Right.
That's not enough time to learn the organization, to develop, to learn your coaching skills. But it's all about, you have to be successful right away. And from the growth mindset perspective, mistakes are vital to success because they teach us about things.
I was just listening. Some celebrity was saying, I think it might have been Robert De Niro, but I'm not sure. He was saying that his best learnings come from failure. And I was thinking at the time, is he giving me a line or is he being honest?
Well, I haven't interviewed Robert De Niro, so I don't know. But it's the safe answer. What I'll say is that sounds like a very growth mindset statement, right? Yeah. That mistakes and rejections inform us the most about learning opportunities, about how we can cultivate and grow from here and adjust.
Because if you take a moment, well, for me anyway, if I take a moment after the rejection happens and I kind of I write it down, I dissect it, I can often see that I'm going to learn a lot from that rejection. And next time I'm going to do something a little different.
Yeah, I love that approach, Julie. That's what I would recommend as a therapist. Like sit down and acknowledge. I think we need to acknowledge like this sucks. Like right now, like this feeling is uncomfortable. It's hard. It's difficult. And that's important to, mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment. It's important to sit with those feelings, maybe get distracted for a little bit, and then come back and reflect when that neocortex, when that prefrontal cortex is online again, the amygdala is not so firing rapidly. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is scary. Right. We can have some time to reflect on what this means for us going forward.
I'm also curious, if you don't mind, I love ask a question. So can we also, in the areas where we have fixed mindsets, are you also saying that we can change those from fixed mindsets to more growth mindsets? Because I don't always practice what I preach. I don't like being rejected. I'm a little bit more like, gotta have it perfect before I send it out into the world.
Yeah, absolutely we can. It's a great question, Jody. So we can absolutely develop our mindsets, which is good news, right? We can change our mindsets and mindsets themselves aren't fixed. So when I work with someone who has a lot of perfectionism, the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy approach is make mistakes on purpose. So actually get rejected. So I'll have people with a lot of social anxiety who are really afraid of conflict or confrontation or feeling rejected, call up a place and ask them for something that they don't have. So I've had folks call a Jimmy John's and ask for, do you have any hammers there? Do you sell hammers? Or call a deli and ask, do you have any bat meat? I'm really hungry for a bat sandwich right now. It sounds bizarre, but the idea is you get used to them saying no. And then that's called exposure therapy, right? It's really hard. It brings up a lot of anxiety. But what we learn from that is, one, I can handle rejection. I can handle and tolerate the feelings.
Right, you're going to live through it.
And two, it's not as bad as I thought. When I work with folks that do this, they'll think they're going to put me on speakerphone and say, "Get a load of this person. They just asked for bat meat." And you know what they do when we call and ask them that? They'll say, "Let me check. I actually don't know." Right. So we have all these assumptions about how rejection is going to play out. And unless we actually have experiences with rejections and mistakes, then we can really learn how to handle that.
Very cool. Jody, any parting thoughts?
I think I do like this idea of the more you do it, the more you realize, look, no one died, no small children or animals were harmed. I'm still here. I'm still surviving. So yeah, do it. Being willing to do it more often. Give yourself a chance to maybe be a little hard on yourself first. Give yourself a chance to really define your value. That's the hard part. Be willing to say, like, what's my tendency as a services provider? My tendency is going to be vague and say I do it all. So really think more about, that's the other thing too, like take the emphasis off you and think more about the problems that you're solving for your clients. And then if that happens that the problem you solve doesn't match up with a problem that they may or may not have, so be it. It's less emotional. So that's one of the things. Try using that to remove some of the emotion out of the rejection.
Yeah, give yourself time, I think, to take it in, and then give yourself some recovery time. I don't know, take a walk or,
Yeah.
Call a friend.
Yeah, I
or
love that
something
what
like
Hans said, like let the amygdala just calm down a little bit and allow the prefrontal cortex to come back online again.
Hans, any last words from you?
No, I think this has been such an interesting discussion. I've learned a lot today. I'll just agree with what we're already talking about. It's important to not let fear dictate how you behave. So if we spend all of our time trying to avoid and dismiss uncertainty and rejection and setbacks, our world actually gets very small. Mm-hmm. And if we're not willing to take any risks, then we're going to actually fuel that anxiety and depression that's not going to be helpful in the long run. So I would say, also give yourself some grace, right? Self-compassion is really important here, but make mistakes and sit with the anxiety that comes up.
Yeah. I mean, it's real, right? It's a real feeling.
Yeah.
Thank you both, Hans, Jody. Really appreciate you being here. I learned a lot too, and hope you all did if you're watching. So I'll see you next time on another edition of PR Patter. Have a great week.